So 5 months before the election, the highest levels of military, intelligence, and political power in the United States of America all got together, did a secret war game to find a way to use riots, nationwide riots, and do favors to the Black Lives Matter movement so that they would owe them favors back to take to the streets against Trump if Trump won the election fair and square, but that they also needed a reason to throw Trump and his family in jail, and they needed a robust, intentional, and specific strategy to go after the networks that enabled Trump's rise to power, because they will not automatically demobilize when Trump leaves office, and they can't be in this country anymore. We need a way to mass arrest them.
That's Mike Benz on Saturday outlining in detail a big chunk of the conspiracy that put Joe Biden in office. It involved a group which most people have never heard of, the Transition Integrity Project. And I share Mike Benz's obsession with their June 2020 war game. I'm Barbara Boyd, and I've been writing about this event ever since August of 2020. I checked. I'm also the co-author of a police dossier. It's the British who murder our presidents. To get your copy, follow the link in the description. Today, I'm going to first talk about the key players in the tip exercise and their shocking, very public plan to subvert the 2020 election. Then I'm going to detail how the rigging of the election, the 4 attempts to jail Trump and wipe out his entire movement, which started on January 6th, all flow from this June 2020 conspirators meeting. Finally, I'm going to show you excerpts of a speech by Donald Trump to the World Economic Forum in January of 2020. It's why this nation's enemies decided long ago that Trump and Trumpism had to be eliminated. It echoes Trump's condemnation of globalism and the Europeans in the new national security policy we talked about on Saturday. But before we get started, please like and share this video. You know it increases our reach on YouTube. The publicly named sponsors of the war game were Rosa Brooks and Niles Gilman from the Wargamed Institute in LA. The Wargamed Institute is the globalist home of Silicon Valley's really crazy anti-Trump billionaires like Reid Hoffman and Eric Schmidt, Google's former chairman. It has additional branches in Venice and Beijing. They claim their China branch is in direct dialogue with Xi Jinping. Saturday, I told you about Michael Anton, who wrote the revolutionary New Trump National Security Doctrine. Anton called out Tip's war game when it happened. He said, accurately, they were planning a coup against the election, and their publicized war game were to normalize the idea in the public's mind. For that insight, Niles Gilman tweeted that Antoine deserved to be executed by a firing squad. Rosa Brooks started out as a lawyer for George Soros at the Open Society Institute, went to Bill Clinton's State Department to conduct regime change operations, then worked for Obama as a lawyer for the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy at the Pentagon. All the time, she was a tenured law professor at Georgetown, one of the nation's preeminent law schools. That's why I don't wonder where our current radical judges came from. She couldn't wait to launch a coup against Trump. In January 2017, just 7 days after the inauguration, she wrote a piece for Foreign Policy magazine titled 3 Ways to Get Rid of President Trump Before 2020. She dismissed the idea, of course, of waiting until the next election and winning it. Instead, she advocated the 25th Amendment and impeachment. Both of those, of course, were tried in Trump's first term and failed. The fourth idea, not mentioned incidentally in the title, is a military coup. She ends this 2017 manifesto with the following. For the first time in my life, I can imagine plausible scenarios in which senior military officers might simply tell the president, no, sir, we're not doing that. 2, thunderous applause from the New York Times editorial board. That's the lawyer for the third most powerful person in Obama's Pentagon speaking. You might ask, what role is she playing now as Democrats foolishly replay the very same game? In June of 2020, Brooks and Gilman convened the tip war game about the 2020 election and its potential aftermath. It had over 100 active participants and 76 role players drawn from former Pentagon officials, the intelligence community, Silicon Valley, Wall Street, the media, and the Republican and Democratic Party and institutions. In short, the corrupt Washington establishment. While some names have been made public, like John Podesta, Donna Brazile, Bill Kristol, Michael Steele, Jennifer Granholm, many others, of course, have not. All of them were anti-Trump. All of them, like Brooks and Gilman, were big players in the attempt to nullify Trump's 2016 election and overthrow the government. Mike Benz does a very good job detailing the various war games in the tip exercise. I'll just leave it at the conclusion. The insurrectionists concluded that in order to prevent Trump from having a second term, Biden needs to somehow roll up a huge victory margin in the election and overcome the obvious perception of fraud. In all their scenarios, including overturning a Trump win, they need to control the military, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and similar street rioters. Well, BLM got $90 million in 2020 with donors like the Democracy Alliance and the Ford Foundation, and Mark Elias, the lawyer who practically led the first coup, was in charge of all their financial filings. The military. On August 11, 2020, Defense One published an article by retired Colonels John Nagel and Paul Yingling, blatantly calling for a military coup. Defense One followed that up on August 18th with a call to make this a matter of reasoned debate within the military rather than rejecting the idea of a coup out of hand. Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was not about to obey any order from the president to quell an insurrection. He was already in open revolt against President Trump in June of 2020. Now, on Saturday, I got a few comments about where to find the national security strategy I was talking about. It's on the White House website. But if you subscribe to our newsletter, we provide you with all the research which backs up what I'm saying. If you haven't already, go there and subscribe now. The link is in the description. The most overlooked part of the TIPS exercise is the appendix to the report. It debates the idea to criminally proceed against Trump even after he leaves office and to totally wipe out his, quote, white supremacist and extremist base, end quote. Here's the money quote. More broadly, there needs to be a robust, intentional, and specific strategy to challenge the white supremacist and extremist networks that enabled Trump's rise to power and were in turn enabled by Trump's administration. This base will not automatically demobilize if and when Trump leaves office, and it is inimical to the kind of pluralist democracy the founders intended. Doesn't that sound like the setup for January 6, 2021? Recently, Senator Chuck Grassley and others disclosed that Arctic Frost, an FBI investigation opened in April of 2022, ahead of the 2022 midterms, sought to take out huge chunks of the Republican Party's election organization, spied on 10 sitting senators, and targeted Citizens Trump for no less than 4 prosecutions. Like their current European counterparts, these Democrats slandered the electoral majorities who opposed them, not as citizens, but as white supremacists and extremists. If you think about the institutions they said they need to wage a coup in this document, the Justice Department, the Pentagon, and a mobilized radical base that they control, you get a lot of insight as to why Kash Patel, Don Bongino, and Pete Hegseth are being so relentlessly targeted, even by people who say they support the president. And it's why Antifa has been allowed to run loose and grow since the summer of 2020. The only other institution you really need here is the media. But hey, They were already fully treasonous when Trump came down that escalator in 2015. So what engenders this hate against Trump and Americans, quite frankly? On January 21st, 2020, President Trump went right to the belly of the beast, the World Economic Forum, and presented the same spiritual agenda, which is in his new national security strategy. I just want to play 2 excerpts for you, and you'll see my point.
This is not a time for pessimism. This is a time for optimism. Fear and doubt is not a good thought process, because this is a time for tremendous hope and joy and optimism and action. But to embrace the possibilities of tomorrow, we must reject the perennial prophets of doom and their predictions of the apocalypse. They are the heirs of yesterday's foolish fortune tellers, and I have them, and you have them, and we all have them. And they want to see us do badly, but we don't let that happen. They predicted an overpopulation crisis in the 1960s, mass starvation in the 70s, and an end of oil in the 1990s. These alarmists always demand the same thing: absolute power to dominate, transform, and control every aspect of our lives. We will never let radical socialists destroy our economy, wreck our country, or eradicate our liberty. Centuries ago, at the time of the Renaissance, skilled craftsmen and laborers looked upwards and built the structures that still touch the human heart. To this day, some of the greatest structures in the world have been built hundreds of years ago. In Italy, the citizens once started construction on what would be a 140-year project, the Duomo of Florence. Incredible place. While the technology did not yet exist to complete their design, city fathers forged ahead anyway, certain that they would figure it out someday. These citizens of Florence did not accept limits to their high aspirations, and so the Great Dome was finally built.
That tradition of optimism, building things, and exploring ever new frontiers of human knowledge is what our founders instilled in this country. It's in our bones. They understood that oligarchical imperial interests were in the process of wiping out that Renaissance tradition in Europe, a process which has almost reached its awful climax today. In conspiracy law, you have to prove that the defendants came to an agreement and then proceeded to act on it criminally. I agree with Mike Benz. The agreement was made in the June Wargame, and the overt acts included the rigged election, January 6, 2021, the 4 Trump prosecutions and those of his supporters who challenged the election, and the attempt to dismantle the president's constitutional control of the military. It's now well past time to investigate all the participants for potential prosecution. I think you already know that we're not supported by anybody except our audience. People comment all the time that we need to have more influence. Well, there's only one way we can do that, and that is to build ourselves and to expand. That's why we ask you to contribute as much as you can to help us do that. I'll see you on Thursday for our show where Susan and I will answer your questions. Until then, stay alert and get your questions in for the show.
Thanks for watching. Please take a moment and subscribe to our free newsletter at prometheanaction.com.